Hey everyone, John Abril here, your local real estate agent and mortgage broker, serving the Inland Empire. Over the last few days, you've probably seen some shocking headlines about Venezuela, military raids, oil politics, global tension, and if you live here in Southern California, especially places like Upland or Rancho, you might be wondering, how does this all affect me? Will gas prices go up, down? Will my grocery bill change? And what about mortgage rates and home prices here in Inland Empire in 2026? Well, today I want to break this down clearly and responsibly, separating confirmed facts from analyst estimates and real economic impacts from political noise. Everything I'm sharing today is based on reporting from major outlets like the New York Times, NBC News, BBC, PBS, the NewsHour, Reuters, along with data from the U.S. Energy Information Administration, Realtor.com, Zillow, and the California Association of Realtors, as well as the Federal Reserve. This isn't politics, this is economics, housing, and how global events can or cannot affect your everyday financial life. So let's start with what actually happened. But before we do, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so that you can get notifications when more videos like this pop up. On January 3rd, 2026, U.S. Special Operations Forces carried out a coordinated early morning raid in Caracas that resulted in the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. According to detailed reporting from the New York Times, NBC News, BBC, PBS, and Reuters, the operation involved elite U.S. military units inserting into the Caracas area shortly after 2 a.m. local time. Venezuelan air defense systems were reportedly neutralized or bypassed during the operation, and Maduro and his wife were taken into U.S. custody and transported to a U.S. Navy warship offshore. Later that day, Maduro was flown to New York, where he now faces long-standing U.S. charges related to drug trafficking and narco-terrorism. Now, some reports, including statements from the U.S. officials and Venezuelan sources, suggest that there was electronic or cyber disruptions during the raid, potentially affecting communication or power infrastructure in parts of Caracas. However, not all the outlets treat full power grid disruption as independently verified, so it's best described as reported but not fully confirmed. What is confirmed is this: Maduro's removal marks the most significant U.S. military intervention in Latin America since Panama in 1989. Following the raid, Venezuela entered a tense transition period. An interim government was installed and temporary state of emergency was declared. According to Reuters and Al Jazeera, the country is experiencing renewed inflation pressure, food shortages, and internal political instability. So how does this affect us? How does that connect to us? The answer, as with many global events, runs through oil. Let's get one thing straight up front. Venezuela does not suddenly belong to the United States. The U.S. does not legally own Venezuelan oil fields, refineries, or reserves. However, according to statements from U.S. officials reported by Reuters, CNN, and PBS, the United States now has what they describe as tremendous leverage over Venezuela's oil sector during this transition period. Venezuela holds the largest proven oil reserves in the world, roughly 300 billion barrels, according to data compiled by the U.S. Energy Information Administration and BP-style global energy reviews. This part is well established. What's changed in production? Venezuelan oil production has collapsed from nearly 3 million barrels per day in the late 1990s to roughly 800,000 to 1 million barrels per day today, depending on the estimate. Now, some energy analysts cited that Reuters, Bloomberg-style energy analysis, and industry commentary estimate that roughly 30 to 50 million barrels of Venezuelan crude are currently sitting in storage or tied up in disrupted export flows. That number is an estimate and not an official EIA inventory figure, and it is important to say that clearly. If we use the upper end of that estimate, 50 million barrels, here is the context. The United States consumes roughly 20 million barrels of petroleum products per day. So even 50 million barrels equates to about 2.5 days of US consumption. That tells you something important. Even if Venezuelan oil flows shift, it does not dramatically change the global oil balance in the short term. This is why most mainstream energy analysts say Venezuela is not a primary driver of near-term U.S. gasoline prices. As of early 2026, according to EIA and GasBuddy forecasts reported by CNN, the national average gasoline price is expected to hover around the high $2 to low $3 per gallon, with a projected national average close to $2.97 for the year. Here in Southern California, including the Inland Empire, gas prices typically run higher than the national average, often by 30 to 50 cents to sometimes $1 more per gallon, depending on the city, taxes, and the refinery conditions. That puts much of the Inland Empire roughly in that low to mid, maybe high $3 range, though exact prices vary daily and should always be checked locally. The key point, Venezuela is not the reason gas prices are currently moderate. Prices are being held down by near record US crude and liquids production, around the mid 13 million barrels per day range. Strong global supply and softer demand growth due to efficiency, remote work, and electric vehicle adoption. Diesel, however, deserves attention. Venezuelan heavy crude is particularly useful for producing diesel fuel. If heavy crude supply tightens, diesel markets can feel pressure, and diesel prices affect trucking, agriculture, logistics, and food distribution. That matters here in the Inland Empire, which is one of the largest logistics hubs in the country. So while gasoline prices may remain stable, diesel costs are something to watch, especially for businesses and food supply chains. Now let's talk about something that affects Inland Empire families far more than Venezuela ever will: electricity and utility costs. According to data from the California Energy Commission, EIA, and Regional Economic Analysis, inland areas like Riverside and San Bernardino counties tend to use more electricity per household than coastal regions, experience hotter summers and colder winter nights, and rely on housing stock that is often older and less energy efficient. It's common to see Inland Empire households using 10,000 to 11,000 kilowatt hours per year compared to 6,000 to 7,000 kilowatts in some coastal areas. As a result, many households here pay roughly $150 to $300 per month for electricity during peak seasons, or around $1,800 to $2,200 per year in total, though actual bills vary by home, insulation, and definitely usage. Why does this matter in real estate? Because as a homeowner, you don't just look at your total monthly payment, you look at your total monthly obligations. A $300 utility bill is literally a part of your monthly expense. But from a budgeting and affordability standpoint, it can feel similar to carrying an additional fixed monthly payment. That's why I always tell buyers in the Inland Empire, ask about utility history. Energy efficiency matters. Solar insulation and newer construction can dramatically affect long-term affordability. Zooming out again, according to the Federal Reserve's most recent projections, core inflation is expected to trend toward the mid 2% range in 2026. This is a forecast and not a guarantee, and it depends on energy prices, labor markets, and global stability. Lower inflation gives the Fed more flexibility, which brings us to mortgage rate. As of early 2026, Optimal Blue data reported by Fortune shows 30-year fixed-rate conventional mortgages are around 6.15%, 15-year fixed-rate mortgages in the mid 5% range. FHA and VA loans generally slightly below conventional rates by about 0.5%. Many mainstream forecasts, including Realtor.com, MBA, and Freddie Mac commentary, suggest that if inflation continues cooling, mortgage rates could drift into the high 5% to low 6% range later in 2026. And these projections are not promises, okay? So don't hold me to it. So what does this mean locally? Across the Inland Empire, inventory is higher than it was during the extreme shortage years of 2021 and 2022. Days on market are longer and the price growth has cooled significantly. Depending on the specific city and month, year-over-year price changes across Riverside and San Bernardino counties are generally around low single digits, with some areas flat and others modestly up. Inventory levels also are meaningfully higher than during the pandemic surge, though exact percentages vary by city, price point, and timing. The result is a more balanced market. Buyers have more choice, sellers must price realistically. Homes that are well presented and correctly priced still sell, but overpricing is being punished. Now, if mortgage rates continue easing, many analysts expect buyer activity to improve in the second half of 2026, especially for first-time buyers and move-up buyers who have been waiting on the sidelines. One final piece to watch is labor and immigration. Pew Research estimates that the U.S. Venezuelan origin population has grown significantly since 2021, likely reaching roughly 700 to 800,000 people today when accounting for recent migration. Many Venezuelans, like many immigrants, broadly work in construction, logistics and warehousing, hospitality, health, and elderly care. Policy around temporary protected status and parole programs is currently under debate, and future enforcement depends on political and legal decisions that are not yet settled. If protections were reduced, that could affect labor availability in certain sectors. If migration increases due to instability, that could affect housing demand. These are scenarios, not facts, and they depend entirely on the future policy decisions. So here's the bottom line. Venezuela's collapse is dramatic, but for most Inland Empire households, the impact is indirect and limited in the short term. Gas prices are being driven by global supply, not Venezuela. Utilities remain a bigger affordability challenge locally. Mortgage rates are influenced by inflation and Fed policy, not military raids. And the Inland Empire housing market is stabilizing, and it's definitely not crashing. Global events matter, but local fundamentals still matter more when it comes to your home, your budget, and your future. So if you're thinking about buying, selling, or refinancing in 2026, preparation matters more than prediction. So if you found this breakdown helpful, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who has been confused about what's happening in the headlines and whether or not it's good or bad. Drop a comment below. Are you planning to buy or sell this year? What's your biggest concern? Rates, prices, affordability? I'm John Abril, your real estate and mortgage broker serving the Inland Empire. Thank you for watching.